All right. Hey, good morning, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Monday, August 29th, 2022. This is your morning tropical update, once again in a video format. We are still tracking several areas of interest across the Atlantic basin, and we do have a significant typhoon threat to talk about in the Western Pacific today. So we're going to cover that at the end of the video, but we are looking at the Atlantic basin here today, what is quickly becoming the peak of the hurricane season, and we still have a mess on our hands. We have a whole bunch of disturbances and things, but nothing really jumping off the page trying to form up. But we do have mostly one big area of interest to talk about, which is Invest 91L. That'll be the bulk of the video this morning. But we have several other little things scattered around the map here this morning. So look at the Hurricane Center's 5-day map. We're going to cover a couple of these real quick, and then we'll talk about 91L and the typhoon over there across the pond. So morning outlook from the National Hurricane Center showing 4 areas of interest, and there probably should be a 5th one on here. In no particular order, we have a tropical disturbance down in the Caribbean Sea. This is the one we talked about over the weekend. It's going to go juice up the pattern in Central America. You can see a more disorganized cloudiness and thunderstorms here this morning across that region. And basically what's going to happen is some sort of gyre of low pressure is going to spin up here the next couple of days, and we could see a disturbance ride off of that into the Yucatan. Hurricane Center gives that about a 20% chance of happening. The GFS was forecasted to become a significant storm and then move into the Gulf as a hurricane this weekend, but the GFS has finally backed off on that. Something the GFS has a big problem with. It produces so many spurious tropical storms that never happen. Um, we talked about over the weekend as, hey, the GFS has been screaming about this, but it screams about a lot of things that don't actually happen. That's why we were very cautious about how we talked about it. And it appears the GFS is once again coming off of one of its many known biases. So we're gonna the GFS has been struggling this year, so we're gonna keep a grain of salt in that model for medium range outlooks for these storms. But there is some indication from like the NavGem and Euro that some sort of low pressure could be developing over there, but it's not a big deal here right now. Something to watch, Yucatan and such, but no big deal. We also have this little tropical little thing spinning around to the east of Bermuda today, about 600 miles east of Bermuda. It's a really small, low level swirl. Too much dry air and shear, it appears, for it to get going. If it could sustain thunderstorms, it could become a short-lived named storm. But this is just not doing very well, and I don't think it's going to get going. Neither does a hurricane center. Just a 10% chance of development in the next 5 days. Finally, we also have a tropical wave leaving Africa here this morning. Big wave, big broad wave here is another big monster wave comes off Africa. Same thing 91L was when it left. This is going to slowly move up and around towards the west, but it's going to take a couple more days for it to get there. So we're going to watch that wave as well, but it's no threat anytime short term. The high pressure system controlling the speed of these systems coming across the MDR is very weak right now. So systems like 91L and this big wave should be moving at like 20 something miles an hour, and instead they're moving at like 8 miles an hour. So these waves are crawling along. We have many days to watch them. So 91L here from the Hurricane Center, up to an 80% chance of development in the next 5 days. So that we're still confident this is going to at least become a tropical depression. But how strong it gets remains to be seen, and the future implications of the track for the eastern U.S. remain, questionable. Satellite presentation of the system this morning looks about the same as it did yesterday. You've got 2 different areas of thunderstorm activity to the north and south of what is still a wave axis for now. Well, it's not really a wave. It's more of a broad, elongated circulation center. It is closed low, but it's just very, very broad. You've got this big, broad circulation, and it hasn't tightened up anymore. We don't have any morning ASCAT passes to confirm that, but from what the satellite shows us, there's enough low-level clouds exposed to tell us that it probably hasn't figured out which side it wants to develop on. And that's the first clue, is if it develops more up here or more down here, it changes your starting trajectory, which is kind of an important note here. So that's something we have to watch first. And I want to just point out, this isn't an organized storm yet. So computer models struggle with this because you either have to guess where your storm actually is, quote unquote, or where it's going to start. And I've always kind of attributed it to, if I told you I want you to guess who's going to win a race, I tell you the 3 drivers and the 3 cars, but I don't tell you where they're going to start on the track. They're just going to start wherever I feel like it. And it's like you would go, okay, well, how on earth could I predict who's going to win the race when I don't know even where they're starting? And that's the key here. So when we're looking at these models, we have to kind of keep it broad brush. We have to understand that a lot of these models don't see what's actually happening yet. So until the storm has actually got a center and we know where it is, models are to be distrusted even more than they are normally to be distrusted. If y'all longtime viewers know that I'm not big on the models for like big stuff. They're more illustrative for how we do the forecasts around here. So we're going to keep an eye on that. That's the first thing, but it's struggling with dry air. It's struggling with an upper level low to its north, pulling off some wind shear. I mean, it's not in a great environment. It's going to struggle for a couple more days. It appears by the end of the week things will maybe become a little better for it, but it's going to be fighting some dry air and some shear through a lot of its life right here. But it looks like it's going to develop north of the Lesser Antilles. So one of the things we do know today with a pretty good amount of confidence is the storm is probably going to be north of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands by the end of the week. This is valid Saturday morning, September 3rd. European model showing the system significantly north of Puerto Rico. Something that the trends have shown change. A couple of runs like 2 or 3 days ago, the European model had the storm much further south and stronger, very close to Hispaniola. But the European model today has pulled this much further back and slowed the progress down a little bit. This matches up very well with the GFS, who sees a stronger system, but has almost the exact same placement. So the system is moving around that edge of the high pressure cell, and it's moving towards the Bahamas. Now, the models do believe that at some point there's going to be a break somewhere out here for the storm to escape out of, instead of being shoved all the way into the Bahamas and potentially into Florida or somewhere else on the East Coast. It looks like that's going to happen, but it's not guaranteed. One of the important terms is going to be how far north it already is. If it's on the southern edge of these tracks, like it was showing here earlier, the 18Z runs from last night of the spaghetti models, quote unquote, showing it further south, but then like the Euro, they've shifted north this morning. So we're seeing more of a northerly shift, and the further north the storm gets in the short term, the more likely it wants to turn to sea. The further south it is, the less likely it feels the pull of what's up here trying to pull it back to sea, and the more it wants to kind of move off to the south into the west. So that's what we don't want, because the further south and west it gets, closer to the Bahamas it gets, the more likely it is to want to keep going that way. So I want to stress that I don't want to say it's set in stone that it's going to turn, nor do I want to say it's set in stone that it's going to come to the eastern U.S. either. We just have to keep watching. I remember a couple years ago we had Hurricane Dorian that we at this point thought, oh man, Florida's getting a whale of a storm, and then 2 or 3 days later we knew, oh, it's going to stop and turn. It's not a big deal. So even if these models have a consensus, it's not exactly the case. I want to show you why that is, though, because this is valid again Saturday or Sunday morning, September 4th. So the pattern over the eastern U.S. is favorable for a turn to sea. Again, you have some kind of organized storm here north of the Bahamas. The overall pattern is a ridge over the eastern or the central and western U.S. and a trough over the eastern U.S. Okay, this is favorable for storms turning to sea. This trough erodes high pressure, so you have your high cell over here, and it breaks down this side of the high pressure. Okay, this rotates clockwise in a very basic sense, and the storm wants to feel a weakness in this ridge and move away. On the GFS, it shows a pretty significant trough right here, and the high is smushed down enough where the storm can probably find a way to escape out to sea and not bother the eastern U.S. Now, I want to show you the Euro, which has a slightly different take. The Euro shows a bit of a stronger high that kind of blocks the system from moving and shows this trough being weaker. The trough's weaker, the storm likely does not feel the influence of that trough, and it probably just sits here for a couple days and waits on the next trough to come down. Now, in a couple days after, the European shows a stronger trough coming down and then shows that exit out to sea. But that is kind of the difference here. The European showing some potential for where the high is a bit stronger and the storm may want to wander closer to the coast before turning. GFS shows it turning earlier. Again, that consensus does not mean it's going to turn. It just means that the turn is the more likely thing. And again, with the basic pattern of what's over the U.S., this ridge over here, the trough over here, bodes well. But again, I don't want to say that we're absolutely in the clear yet, because we're not. So that's going to be the big determining factors. How strong the trough is over the East Coast. Does the storm find enough of a weakness, and is it already far enough north to want to feel that weakness and move away? If it happens to wind up further south or significantly further south, like if the storm winds up being further down here, it may not feel that trough at all, and then eventually may slide up under the high or something. There's other scenarios where that's possible, so we're going to keep a close eye on that. But right now, 91L, no major threat to the eastern U.S. Again, recurve looks likely, but we have to keep an eye on it, and we're going to see once it develops, we'll have a better idea in 2 or 3 days of how these patterns are going to evolve, and if we're going to have a strong storm, weak storm, and everything in between. So keeping an eye on it. Finally, I want to wrap up this morning's video with tropical storm, or what's now Typhoon Hinnamnor. This is quickly becoming an issue for Japan's southern islands. This is a satellite presentation of the system over the last several hours. Look at this clearing out of the eye. deep cold cloud tops surrounding that eye at this point. You can see that eye pop out right about there, and then those that ring of deep cold convection around that eye, showing a very, very healthy hurricane, very classic looking hurricane or typhoon in this case. These cirrus clouds aloft showing good outflow in the northern and eastern sections of the storm, and of course that deep Westpac classic southern outflow channel that all these storms seem to have. Little bit of shear impinging on the storm, it looks like, right around the edge of the cloud shield here, but overall the system is in a very good environment. Likely very warm water, since this basin has not produced much of anything for tropical systems this year. Very much untapped warm water, and Hinnamnor, it looks like it's very much taking advantage of that. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center is forecasted to become a monster of a typhoon. Look at this forecast, guys. 145 knots within the next 48 hours. That is 160, 165 miles an hour. That is firmly into Category 5. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center is pulling no punches with this one. Last night I mentioned in a post that they typically notoriously under forecast these systems and have to play catch up, but JTWC going yard on this one. And look at the track. Look how concerning this is for the Japan southern islands. So again, the mainland of Japan's up here. Korea, southern Korean peninsula is over here. Taiwan, the Philippines. Get your geography back in order here. These island chains all belong to Japan. They're just like Kadena, and some of the islands down here. Look at the forecast. So there's two things that concern me. Number one, 145 knots. That's a monster of a typhoon. That's Category 5. And look at the slowdown. This is August 31st. Um, morning, afternoon. But look at this, late, August 31st, September 1st, September 2nd, September 3rd. It's moved a few hundred miles. It basically shows this thing diving down southwest and stalling over the near the islands or over them potentially, and then eventually moving back to the north. But that's going to take like another 4 or 5 days. You could be talking about potential typhoon or super typhoon conditions over these islands for days. I mean, we're talking 3, 4, 5 days potentially, because this forecast cone ends right here. The storm's still 105 knot typhoon, which is about a Category 3. So it goes from Category 5 to Category 3 due to the slow motion and upwelling, but you're talking about parking a major typhoon over these islands for days. Even if the system is not directly over some of the islands, you're talking about the influence of the rainfall. This could be a prolific, historic rainfall event for these islands. I mean, this could be a serious catastrophe that could be unfolding here for these islands after what has been such a quiet start to the Western Pacific season. All of a sudden, you got this super typhoon that's going to come through and stall over these islands. This is going to be bad if these forecasts don't change. But it looks like the steering currents are going to collapse and leave Hinnamnor sitting in this region for days on end. And again, this forecast cone could look like this, and then this, and then this eventually, but it may take 3 or 4 more days to pick this up and drag it across the rest of Japan and get it up out of here. So I wanted to point out this is going to be a significant event for this in this region, something to watch carefully. But we could have a Category 5 super typhoon, which would be the first Category 5 of the season for any basin, and something to watch over the next few days as well. So that's what I got for you guys this morning. Tropical update, guys. We'll have some more posts later today on the page. Hurricane Katrina's anniversary, 17 years ago, I believe, to the day, and also last year on this day, of course, Hurricane Ida made landfall in southeast Louisiana as a Category 4 hurricane. So we'll remember both those storms this afternoon. And we'll have some more stuff. We'll have some more musings about the tropics. But again, no major threats in the short term, but we will watch 91L as it moves up this weekend and see if it's a threat or not. So we got for you guys this morning on your topical update. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one.